All right, let's go over some of the fundamentals of Orchestrator, understand how it works better. The best way to think about Orchestrator is that it's a service that's keeping track of a bunch of running Orchestrator instances. You can think of these as runs, in process orchestrations, and generally the Orchestrator service is asleep, and all of these orchestration instances are paused. And the work is out there somewhere, waiting for someone to work on it or being worked on. And when work is done, events are fired back at the orchestrator service that wake it up, and then it carries out a step evaluation and is essentially checking uncompleted steps and checking the stage to see if the stage should transition to another stage, a different stage, and then the orchestrator service goes to sleep. And here's another view of it, how the actual work cycle works. When a step is started, its status changes to in progress, and the assigned user is notified via email. And then the user goes to the appropriate location in the pilot. It will always be a record page, and sees the work guide component. And in that work guide component, they see the step flow, which is a screen flow associated with the step. In future releases, there will be other kinds of steps that run automatically, but in the pilot, the only step type that's available is a step flow that is worked on by an actual human. So when the assigned user finishes the step flow, the work guide will generate an event and notify the orchestrator and say, hey, this work has been done. And if there are any output variables, as you may have seen in the first tutorial, it will provide those to the orchestrator as well. And so the orchestrator receives that event, wakes up, and carries out its evaluation. And depending on the configuration of a given step, that step may be left in progress or marked as complete. So steps have three states: unstarted, in progress, and completed. And when the orchestrator carries out evaluation of the current stage, and there's always only going to be one current stage, if a step is unstarted, it needs to figure out whether to start that step now or not. So it evaluates that step's entry conditions. If the step already is in progress, then it needs to figure out whether that step should be marked completed or not. So it evaluates that step's exit conditions. And if the step is not unstarted and not in progress, then it is completed and basically just gets ignored. Let's talk about these entry conditions. There are three different ways that you can configure a step and how it gets started. The default is it starts as soon as the stage starts. So you generally need to have at least one step in your stage that does start at the same time as the stage. And the next option you have is to say, I want to start this step when another step is completed, and you get to pick whichever step you want. It doesn't actually have to be the step that's stacked immediately above it in the canvas. And the third and most powerful option is you can essentially provide your own flow, your own auto-launched flow to make the call, and it will run each time the orchestrator evaluates this unstarted step. And depending on what you return from your flow, orchestrator will either start that step or carry on. And more specifically, if you want to do that, if you want to use one of these so-called entry flows, then what you do to signal to the orchestrator that, in your opinion, yes, this step should be started, is you create this output variable. It's called is orchestration condition met. It's just a Boolean output variable. And if you return true, then the orchestrator will start this step. So, and you have pretty much unlimited power to do anything you want in this custom flow. So particularly uh, in the early stages of Orchestrator, when we haven't had a chance to build all of the sort of out-of-the-box functionality we want to provide, these override flows are going to be very useful in um, helping solve more complex problems. And in general, if there's something that has to be done today in an override flow, and we get signal from users that, hey, they're doing this over and over again, it's kind of a pain to have to create an override flow, that's one of the things we'll use to determine what to sort of bring in and make automatic. There is going to be a fourth option here. You may be thinking, hey, I already have these expression builders. Decision elements, for example, have these nice expression builders that just let me build an expression. Why aren't you providing that? And the answer is we will. Okay, now another important concept is assigning steps. Uh, in the pilot, as I mentioned, the only step type that you can use is a work step. And work steps are designed to be worked on by a human. They have to be assigned to at least one assignee. In the pilot, the only available assignee choice is a single user specified via their username. In future releases, we're going to expand this to things like roles, queues, and groups. Let you use email addresses. So this will eventually get quite sophisticated. We even intend to allow you to use things like skills-based assignment and override flows to dynamically decide assignment. When the step starts, whoever is assigned to this work is going to get one of those email notifications that you saw in the first tutorial. Now, just like you have some options for determining when a step is started, you have some options for determining when a step gets marked as complete. And there's two choices for completion control in the pilot and in summer 21. The first is, and default is called automatic. And basically what that means is if the step flow finishes without a fault, then the orchestrator will find out about that and mark the step as complete. And so if you're comfortable that one single trip through that step flow that gets all the way to the end is adequate to get the work done, this is what you want to go with. It's definitely the easiest way. If you need something more rigorous or sophisticated, then you have a similar opportunity here to provide your own override flow to determine whether the step should be marked as complete. And in some ways, we originally called these exit flows or exit determination flows, but one of the things we've realized is that this flow, because it executes every time the orchestrator wakes up for every in-process step, has a lot of power. You can put a lot of processing smarts there, and we will actually use that in an upcoming tutorial to show how you can build some really powerful advanced approval process capabilities just using these available pilot tools. If you play around on the canvas, you will note that you can add decision elements to an orchestration as well as stages and steps. And that allows you to do some useful flow control. And basically, you can have stages that only ever start if a certain set of conditions is true. And these decision elements can also reference the outputs from upstream work steps. Now, one thing you can't do is you can't loop one of these branches around and restart a stage. That's something that we are going to add soon. A couple of things to keep in mind about steps and stages. There's no one right way to model a business problem. You're going to find that you're trying to decide between more stages and fewer steps per stage, fewer stages and more steps per stage. There's no one right answer, and you should feel free, experiment with it and learn more about the system. You'll get a feel for what makes the most sense. Another decision point that you'll find yourself thinking a lot about is how many steps to break work into. And one guideline that I find useful is the cup of coffee guideline, which basically says that anything that's generally would get done during the same cup of coffee by the same person probably should be part of the same step. So you can use that to avoid getting too granular and creating too many steps. It's a balancing act where you're balancing maintenance and readability and flexibility and configurability, and there's as much art to it as science. So it'll be an interesting learning journey for everybody.